Welcome to the Man's World podcast, where we talk about all things related to men growing up, living, being married, raising kids, anything has to do with being a man, living in the West, being Muslim, relationships, everything. Today's topic is about being a stepfather. We've touched on this in previous episodes, but we're going to do a quick episode just about some of the things you have to watch out for if you're going into a marriage or relationship with someone who actually has a child already from a previous marriage or relationship. Um, if you have any questions, just enter them right into the chat. Or if you want to remain anonymous, you can click on the link that I'm going to post in the chat as well, and we'll go from there. So just to start off, so what are some? And again, we're not going to go too deep because this is a very deep topic with a lot of different nuances and a lot of different situations that men particularly can run into when you're marrying somebody or getting into a marriage with someone that already has children, a child or children. So we're just gonna touch on a few things just to get you guys thinking in the right realm of what you should be analyzing when you're going into that situation. So right off the top, what's the first thing that you think of, Mubarak, when you want to advise somebody of like, hey, they come to you and say, hey, I'm about to marry somebody, they have a child, what should I be looking out for?
So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The first thing that we should make clear is that yes, these are general. We're speaking in generalities, right? In general, and so for people that may have some specifics, you can email us with a specific situation, and if we're able, we'll try to help. But this is general, and all of the things that we talk about, for those who may be wondering, we have direct experience and experiences with dealing with these topics. Everything that we've gone over so far, we've been in the trenches with these things. So don't assume that we're just talking outside of our heads. We have some experience with what we're talking about. So if you have some specifics or some more detailed or difficult situations that you're in, don't hesitate to reach out. That we will try to help if we can. And Allah knows best. So the first thing, as far as being a stepfather, that people should know is that, number one, it's almost unheard of and very, very rare that a man marries a woman with children because he wants stepchildren or he wants children around.
Right.
That's not the reason why. Most of the time, 99.99% of the time, why he married that woman. He married the woman because he wanted to marry to her. She had children, and so that is an addition or an add-on or something that he's willing to deal with to be able to be with this woman. So for the woman who's has a stepdaddy coming in, or a person, you have to know that you can't assume any other way, regardless of what they say. Most of the people are willing to put up with your children to be with you.
Yeah.
And and for the man in the majority situation, it's not that he got married so that he can have some stepchildren running around. Got married for the woman. So you have to be very honest with yourself about that. You have to know, listen, this is what you got. This is what you married. You wanted to marry the woman. These children are an add-on, and they're going to do what things normally do when they're not the reason why you're there, but they're kind of getting in the way sometimes or whatever. They're going to have some challenges, some annoyances, and those things. So you have to be ready for that, of course. But the first, I think, to me, the most important thing is that to know that if you don't have any children, right, you're marrying a woman who has children and you don't have any, that there is going to be there's definitely going to be a tug of war there, where you're going to have to balance, you trying to build and grow and develop this relationship with the mother, and she is at the same time trying to balance a relationship with her children, and you also in it. So most likely you are secondary a lot of times.
Hmm.
And even when you want to really connect with that child, with the stepchild, and you want to be, this great stepdad or whatever, um, that child, boy or girl, is going to prefer their mother most of the time. And
Hmm.
so at sometimes the most inopportune times, you will get reminded that you're actually just a stepfather. You're not the actual father of the child. And so emotionally, that can take a toll on you where you want to, either whether you want to play with them or you want to you want to interact in some sort of way, you want to make some decisions, and you're going to be reminded regularly if you forget, especially when you don't have children. So you're experiencing this, and then sometimes you get in a situation, and then a lot of times adults, they enjoy having children around or playing with them or whatever. Mark my words, you will be reminded that you're just the stepfather, and so you have to be prepared for that, be ready for that. um it can blindside you, and if you're not prepared for that, then it's going to be something where almost if you mention it to another man or someone who doesn't have the experience, one of your friends, especially people who are getting married to a woman who has children and they don't have any, usually they're younger, usually,
Hmm.
but it could be some other cases. So some of your friends or people you may talk to, they may think that you're being weak, or what's your problem? Why are you getting emotionally attached to someone else's child or whatever? But it's a real thing. So you have to be prepared for that.
Hmm. Yeah, and what people have to really realize is that every situation is unique, right? So it's very important to, before you get into the situation, step back and really look at all the different possible scenarios that you could be getting into with that situation, right? And how they could play out. And do a little research. There's enough. I mean, we live in the information age where you can go out there and you can find someone who has a video based off of experience of dealing with the exact situation that you're about to get into, right? You can go and find how, okay, I'm about to marry a woman that has two kids, ages this and that. You could find somebody out there that's dealt with the same exact thing, and they can give you perspective of what you're about to get into. And it kind of ties into what Mubarak just said about, you have to remember that these aren't your children, right? That's the number one thing. You have to remember that these aren't your children. And as far as like how you deal with that going forward with all the different things we're going to talk about, you remind yourself that these aren't your children. And this mindset actually works with your own children as well. But everything that you're going to do, you have to think of, okay, this is charity, right? This is charity. And really, when you deal with charity, like for instance, like if you send money overseas to help somebody poor, you're just thinking about what you're going to get from Allah. You're not thinking about, okay, this person I'm sponsoring overseas that's in Palestine or somewhere that I'm giving them money every month and helping them. You're not thinking like, okay, how are they going to come pay me back or take care of me or get back at me? No, you're like, I'm just going to get the good deeds out of it. You really have to put it in that perspective, even though you may get something of good benefit out of it when you're dealing with, okay, you're taking somebody into your home, taking care of them and providing for them. That may turn into something beneficial down the line. You may get some kind of return on that. But if you set yourself up with the mindset of that, okay, this is really charity. Okay. These aren't my kids. And you keep reminding yourself of that throughout your journey with this stepchild, then it'll help you like deal with a lot of things that come up. Because when Mark mentioned about like that emotional attachment, it's a real thing, especially when you're talking about like depending on how old the kid is, right? Imagine you marrying a woman that like the kid's like you know, a year old. Maybe their father passed away, maybe, something like that. And you're pretty much raising that kid. That kid only knows you as their father, right? But then, and we're going to talk about this as well, and I'm kind of jumping around, but there's no real. You just kind of have to jump on this stuff. There's no real like outline for what you're going to run into in that situation where you married somebody. They're the father, biological father is not in the life anymore. That kid knows you as your father. Once you get into a dispute with parenting style or something with the child, because this happens with our own biological kids, right? You and the mom will be like, listen, I think we should do X. You're like, nah, we're doing Z. And that'll be a dispute. That biological mother that you're married to, even though that kid only recognizes you as their father, will very quickly or most likely say, well, this is my kid and I want to do this with my kid. And you actually have to kind of step back depending on what the situation is. Like, oh yeah, that isn't my kid. Now, if it gets into something like dealing with like the rules of your household, now this is like a different conversation, but there's all these different nuances that you have to really think about of when you're dealing with a stepchild. And like, this is one of them that you really remind yourself, and all the different issues that we're going to talk about, you'll see how reminding yourself that this is not my child and anything I do for them is charity will kind of help you deal with or make the right decisions on how to go forward when you run into a certain situation, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's that there's so many things that we can say, but I'm going to try to stay on the line here. But the next thing that you really have to look at is that if you do have children, you have biological children, okay? And you have stepchildren, you have to know that you are not going to be able to treat them equally. It's going to be very, very hard to do. Now, you might objectively and on paper, hey, you get a a chicken wing, you get a chicken wing, or
Mm-hmm.
things like that. But it's not unnatural for you to have more of a natural pull and connection for your own children. It does happen. Now, the best of men are able to at least make it look and feel, like they are the same. But it's not easy. It's not easy. And you have to let yourself know and give yourself that leeway and make sure that your wife knows that this is not an easy thing for you to do. Sometimes it's a situation where all of the children might be the mother's children,
Yeah.
but some of those children may not be yours. And sometimes it happens vice versa, but a lot of times, the all of the children are the mothers, and but some of the children are the fathers,
Yeah.
and so you're in a situation where you're trying, and you can't beat yourself up about you feeling that favoritism. It's not favoritism. It's that person is a part of your body. That person came from your body, and that person is a part of you. Their blood and bones and marrow is yours, and the other person is not. That doesn't make
Mhm.
them lesser, but that is something that it will eat you alive if you let your conscience get to you and thinking, uh, even sometimes you see, kids, brothers and sisters, they fight, right?
Yeah.
If in the back of your mind you're thinking, "Man, I really want my son to whip her," but it's natural. It's natural. But as far as discipline is concerned, like who was right or wrong, you still do the right thing. But that
Yeah.
inclination of rooting for your own child or having a softer corner or spot for them is natural, and that's something that you are going to battle with the whole time.
Yeah.
And it should be clear to you. It should be clear to the mother, and as far as the children making that clear to them, it's a little bit difficult. When they get older, they really understand. Okay, yeah, this is not my father or this is not my mother. But definitely for the adults, you have to identify it, know it's there, do your best, but you have to give yourself some leeway with that
Yeah.
situation.
And recognizing that issue right there is very important, because what happens is you think like people feel guilty about having that natural connection with their own kids. And what happens is they actually go the opposite way to combat it, and they actually end up mistreating their own kids. So what happens is, like, okay, you have the stepchild and you're like, okay, I know I like my kids more. So, you actually like my kids can't get snacks at 8 o'clock, 8 p.m. No more snacks. Step kid child comes down, is like, I want a snack. It's after 8 p.m. And you're like, okay, because you don't want to, like, you actually go the opposite way. And you see it a lot, like people that deal with sports and coaching. You're actually harder on your own kids than the other kids, and it's because you
Mhm.
want them to be better. But that's, you got to see how that plays out. Like, for instance, I ref basketball, right? I'm a referee, and when I ref, my nephew, I don't call anything for him, right? I don't give him no calls, right? And one, it's in the back of my mind because I know people are watching, like, oh, they know that I'm his uncle and like it's gonna be favoritism. Like, make sure I stay with him. But also, it's like, I want him to develop it all. But that plays out when you're actually raising kids as well, where you can actually go too far of trying to make it like you're not showing favoritism, that you actually show favoritism to the wrong person, right? So it's very important to not show favoritism, even though you will have a favoritism to your own children. So you have to make sure you balance that out. And Mubarak touched a little bit about discipline, and we're going to jump around here. So when you're talking about discipline, it's very important to recognize that, again, you aren't their parent, okay? And you got to make sure you're not crossing any boundaries, right? And as a step parent, and I don't like this idea of step parent because it puts you in this idea of like, I'm their parent. You're not their parent, right? You're in a position to like protect them and provide for them, and because you're their Wally, you're their guardian, right? But as far as like parenting and discipline, when you're looking at a situation like, for instance, if both parents are still involved in this child's life, it's their job to discipline that child. Now, it may be a case where both parents are like cool with like, listen, go ahead and deal with so and so, like, especially if it's like a boy or whatever, right? Yeah, the father might give you Louis, yo, he needs his ass whip his ass just like you would do your own kids. Okay, we on the same page. But you can't raise another kid's child or another parent's child how you would raise your child, especially if that father is like, I don't do that. I don't ground my kids. I don't let my kids have like whatever it is. You have to respect that. And how you do that is you have to put yourself in the other parent's shoes. Imagine you're another parent, another man being involved in your kids' lives and them disciplining them or dealing with them in a way that like, that's not how I do with my kids. You would want them to respect your wishes. And the best bet when you're dealing with that situation is to actually look towards the mother, right? That should be your middleman, your go-between. Hey, so and so is doing XYZ. You need to deal with that. Okay, so that's like, you have to be very careful of not crossing certain boundaries when you're dealing with discipline.
Yeah, absolutely. And I say that you touched on how in treating them fairly. I'll say this: there's an elephant in the room. I'm gonna try to give you a chance to guess what you think that I think the elephant in the room is as far as treating children equally.
Well, it might not be the elephant you're thinking of, but whenever I get into this step parenting issue, and I've seen it in multiple scenarios, and I touched on a little bit about showing favoritism to the wrong child, it's not your responsibility to take care of that child, right? And that's why I want to go back to like, it's charity.
Mhm.
And you can't let your charity take over your responsibility, right? So it's your responsibility to take care of your children. That's your responsibility. And with that being said, I think maybe the elephant in the room is that when you get in those situations, the biological mother of the child, they usually, in most cases, and I say most, not all, but most cases, they expect you to take care of their children as if it is your child, right? And that is one, not just to your own children, because whatever you take out of your pocket to give to someone that you're not responsible for, you're actually taking out of your own children's, right? And this is why it's like, if I was advising men to get in the situation, when you're thinking about taking on a stepchild, the key to like whether you should do it or not is actually looking at the mother. What does the mother expect from you? How is the mother going to be? How are they going? Because that's like the key to everything. If the mother really expects you, like, no, you're supposed to raise her like she's yours, and do all this and that. You're supposed to be her new daddy. That's a major red flag. I would suggest that you actually run away from that situation. So I think the major red flag is that that child is not your responsibility, and you're kind of taking away from your responsibilities by dealing with that charity.
Yeah, you touched very close to the elephant in the room. At least there's plenty of them, but this is the
Yeah.
one that I see a lot, is that and you'll get an indication of this when sometimes you will see a woman say, I'm looking for someone that's willing to be a father figure for my son, and
Mm,
to treat me and my 2 children or my 7 children like their own, and all these things, and they lead with that. And
yeah.
that's understandable for a woman, especially if she doesn't have a father figure, or that the father of those children is not in the picture. Then of
Yeah.
course that's a lot of times that is the motivating factor for a woman to be seeking a husband, is so that she can get herself and her children taken care of and secured and maintained. But where I have seen a man be unfair, especially when he has children, and he will be unfair, or he will go overboard in being good to the stepchildren, is because he wants something good from the mother. So the mother kind of dictates, where he's literally maybe even neglecting his own children and
Hmm.
treating those children so nicely to win the mother's heart and her affection, and to get her to stay around, or these things. And so it happens more than you think. Lots of, I mean, it's almost like a running joke, a meme, where you see, the mother who's got, the kid on the football team or whatever. And so he starts, playing catch with him, and
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
wants to go train him or whatever he's doing, and he don't even play catch with his own son, and so,
Yeah.
but he's doing all those things. So it's funny, but at the same time, it's real. And
Yeah.
so this is a thing where I would say, for the men especially, if you are being, even you being equal sometimes with a stepchild, is unfair to your biological children. And so an example of that may be, you have a legit responsibility to your biological children, full stop. And they have a right over you to get full maintenance and support, and your time and your affection, your energy, or whatever you have. It's your job to raise up your biological children as best you can.
Mhm.
If you dealing with your children, your stepchildren, takes away from the needs of your biological children, you're wrong. Now, I understand that sometimes you have to share resources or whatever, and that's different. But if your biological children can't get what they need from you, because you are going out of your way and you're helping, children who don't belong to you, because you need to make sure you stay in good graces with the mother, then this is wrong. I was counseling one brother who, he was um, going out of his way every time his wife called about her grandson. It wasn't his grandson, but
Mhm.
her grandson. Every time she would go over there, and he felt like he had to, you know, get him in check or do all these things. It's like, you're leaving your home with people who have your true rights and responsibilities for. I mean, we hate it for the child if they need a father figure in their life, and perhaps you could be that, but not at the expense of your own children. So it's
Mhm.
it's it's a hard topic to deal with, but you have to really know for sure. Your first responsibility is to your yourself, as Allah says, "Ku anfusakum wa ahlikum nara." So you save yourself and then your family from the fire. And
Mhm.
it's a thing where you have to really make it clear, articulate, what you have going on with your own children and your own family, what you have to do, what your responsibilities are, and that you are going to be limited in maybe the resources. Now, if you have it like that, great. But if you don't, you need to make sure you articulate that to the young lady who you're with. And if they can't accept that, then this is a situation that probably is one that you need to look to make some adjustments to. or exit altogether, because you're going to be on the hook, for the responsibilities between you and your creator, for neglecting your family. And also, when your children get older, when they have children of their own, they're going to resent how you neglected them and preferred other children who weren't yours because you wanted to be in good graces with the mother. So just be careful.
Yeah, and this is a very big topic actually, as far as looking at the hidden things that could arise from these situations. And we're speaking specifically about stepchildren. But Mubarak touched on something about like your own children resenting you for, the decisions you make. So we live in a culture nowadays where everybody's looking for something to blame, right? For whatever is going on in their lives, they need somebody to be the enemy, to be the blame, because God forbid that they're actually the reason for whatever situation they're in, right? And when you're looking at getting into a blended family, step parent, stepdaddy, whatever situation, think about what's changing in that family's life. And that includes the mother and those potential stepchildren, right? And their biological father and their extended. You have to look at that entire situation like, okay, how, when we get married, how is that changing their lives? Okay. Because if you think about it, there's so many different things. You're going to be basically changing that entire dynamic. And just to give a hypothetical situation, you marry somebody, and what's going to happen? Like, she's going to move in with you. If she has full custody of her child and the father's not Muslim or something, whatever situation, the kid comes with you, right? Comes with her mother, comes and moves in with you. Now we've seen how many movies have we seen with the teenage kid, the parents want to move and they hate their parents because they're taken away from all their friends and all that. Guess what? You are going to be the sole blame for that. I don't care if you're making my mom happy. I don't care if you're giving us a better life. You messed up my life, and I'm going to blame you for every single negative thing that ever happens. Right?
Mm.
There's been situations where a man steps up, right? Takes care of a single mom, brings her kids in, treats them like his own, does everything right. The biological father was a deadbeat, didn't want anything to do with the children. And guess what? Those stepchildren blamed the new husband for the reason why their father wasn't involved in their life, even though he wasn't involved in their life before they got married. Right. So you have to really, really think about that. And that's why it's like when we talk about this being charity, there's also the aspect of you could do all these different, you could be the one that could, like, I could support everybody 100%. I got it like that. It's not going to take away from my children, and I could treat the stepchild just like my children, and all that. Right. At the end of the day, you could do all that work, and that stepchild will still hate your guts, still blame you, still not want anything to do with you when they grow up, still like all these different things. It could be really a total empty investment, right? And this is why you have to really treat it like charity, like, okay, I'm doing this for Allah's sake, and if there's some kind of benefit that comes back or some kind of return, alhamdulillah. And I don't want to sound too like, I don't like, we're talking about the bad things, because if it's a good situation, then you don't need much advice from us, right? But I want to also say just real quickly that there are situations where, that stepchild might be one of the best people in your life, even above your own children, because raising kids it is what it is. Like, you do your best and then they turn out how they turn out. Right. So, but when you have that idea that, one, it's not my child, I'm not going to cross any boundaries, I'm going to look at this as charity, at least puts you in the right mindset to deal with the negative situations that could come up. So just really think about these things. And Mubarak, I want you to touch on a little bit on, like, when you have a situation that there's a stepchild, biological mom, and a father involved in their lives that for some reason doesn't want like custody of the child, but is actually involved in that child's life. Speak a little bit about that, about like that dynamic as far as being a stepdaddy in that situation.
Yeah, because it ties into like kind of what you were speaking about last time, how you have to look at it as charity, and you have to know that you could possibly be raising this child for decades and helping them to reach adulthood and be successful, but you may not get any credit for your efforts.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is a very, very real possibility. And so you have to be able to internalize that, know that you can't say that it might not sting a little and thinking, it's going to be one of their stepchildren to the point where they're about to move out and, start their lives of their own. Don't be upset if graduation or whatever may not have done much at all or anything at all is the one who is, of that. So
yeah,
that's one thing. But
are you breaking up a little bit? Can you hear me?
yeah, sorry, my thing got a delay on it. Sorry, can you hear
No,
me? Can you hear me now?
I was just gonna say real quick that I don't know how many videos I've seen where there's a stepdad that's like the stepdaughter is like getting married or graduating or something, and who's like the man of honor and the one giving her away or stepping up to the podium is the biological dad that ain't been in the kid's life for the last 10, 15 years. And the stepdad's like, wait a minute, I'm paying for the graduation party, I'm paying for the wedding, I'm paying for that. What? And that's a reality. That is a reality.
Yeah, and I was say, like, if the biological father or biological parent wants to be in that child's life and is active in trying to be part of the discipline or whatever, I would say for every stepfather, encourage, push for that child to live and stay with that father full time. And a lot of times the mother will push against that, and it ties into the thing where we're saying sometimes if the stepfather does things that he goes overboard with certain things trying to keep the mother, his wife, happy, but it's not the best thing. And so when you have that triangle of stepfather, biological father, biological mother, triangle of people trying to, if there's any tension whatsoever with discipline, authority, what they should or shouldn't do, anything like that, the stepfather, you have to step back, step out of the situation. You push all of that responsibility and authority on the biological father as much as you can. If you can send that child to live with them, that's the best thing to do. If they are trying to be active, let them be. Let them take care of that child. If you don't, you're asking for trouble. You're asking for another man to be actively meddling in your household. You're asking for another man to be constantly in contact and conflict with your wife, because you're going to be in the middle of that. You're the odd man out here where they have a child together, and that child is going to be being pulled towards the mother or their father, and you're trying to be that third wheel, trying to exert some authority in your household, and you just can't do it. You have someone on the outside who doesn't have to deal with what goes on inside those walls. So they're a third party, and they can kind of dictate, if the child is saying, my daddy says I get to stay up till 10. Not here, little nigga. You're not going to do that here. So your daddy saying that, go and stay with your daddy. But I would say that's the thing where you have to push that child out. And it sounds bad, it sounds negative, but that Islamically, that's what's supposed to happen. When that mother gets married, that those children go, and that's one of the reasons for that, among many, the wisdoms behind why the children go with the father, and he has to figure out what to do. So if that father actually needs or prefers his children to stay with their mother and that stepfather, then if that's the case, then you need to have a man-to-man conversation with him. You don't get to meddle in anything that's going on here. Nothing. So, when like your son or daughter is going to visit you and be with you, do whatever you want to do. But if you need me to step up and to do your job here, then you got to get all the way on out the way. And so that's why I say, and I say this basically, if that stepchild and that mother, if they can't fully 100% be on board with your ship, your program, and how you're going to run things, especially with discipline and, the program that you run in your house, the child's got to go and maybe the mother's got to go too. You can't have it two ways, and that's just the fact of the matter.
And you could check a lot of this right at the door, like, because as Mubarak said, we know the Islamic standard. So if you're looking to get married to a woman that already has children, you should be asking, like, okay, so are the children going to go live with their father? And you should see how she responds to that. Now, if it's like, oh no, they're going to stay with me, then the next question needs to be why. And if it's not like, oh, he's a drug addict, or he's locked up in prison, or he's dead, or he's abusive, and well, make sure you check the abusive thing, because that's going to be like, abusive how? Oh, he said mean things to me. Oh, okay, no. Like, really ask the question why, because you'll find out right there what the mindset is. If there's not a real good Sharia, like, legal reason why that the kid should be coming to stay with her when she's remarrying, right, against Islamic standards, then you should be marry that person in the first place, right? And we talked about this in the previous episodes about, like, looking for the right type of woman and red flags. Well, one of the red flags is like, okay, what's that woman's relationship with her father? And also the next red flag is, okay, if you're marrying somebody that has children, what's that woman's children's relationship with their father? Because if you're bringing that mindset into your household, you're going to have issues. We just talked about some, but you also have to think ahead that, you know what, my marriage with this person might not work. What if we have kids? Guess what? She's going to do the same things with your kids that she just did with this last guy's kids. So you have to really think about that. And just talking a little bit more about that, like that three-way dynamic. And just some advice for guys. One, don't act like you're the replacement. Don't ever be like, I'm your new daddy, and call me Abu and call me Baba, this and that. No, don't call me Abu, whoever your kid is. Like, make it real clear that you're not that person's father. And I'm at the point of, like, it's one thing if, like, a kid's raised from a baby and, like, they have no other, but at some point you have to have that conversation with them. Listen, I'm not your father, right? I know you've been calling me Abu and, like, you didn't understand like that, but I'm not your father. This is who your father is. Okay. Also, don't badmouth their parent. I don't care how bad they are. Let them figure that out themselves. And sure enough, they will figure it out themselves, right? If they're smart. Don't ever try to badmouth their parent. Just let whatever they're doing, like, if they could be, whatever they're doing out there in the streets and whatever. Don't be that person that badmouths their parents. But I got a question for you.
Let me just
go ahead. I got a question. I have to get this. I got a question for you.
Piggyback on that, because I was thinking of, try to hold that thought real quick. I was just thinking of what you said and how you said don't badmouth the parent. And the reason why is because this is what happens. You, as the stepfather, you know that he's terrible. You know he's trash, right? But a lot of times the kids, they don't realize that, because number one, you're covering their basic needs a lot of times. So they really, they don't feel the sting of that father not being there. So then sometimes they occasionally see or talk to or interact with their biological father, sometimes mother. But usually what happens, they come with a gift, they talk nicely to them, they're, like, very encouraging. So what does the child see? the child sees that, oh, every time my dad does show up every 4 years or whenever, he gives me
Yeah.
a gift, he gives me ice cream, he says all these great things, says how big and strong I am and everything. So all they hear is good things, and their experience is great. They don't realize that their dad won't, is not funding them, is not doing all these things. So while you're saying, man, if you badmouth that parent, that other father, that child is there's gonna be a complete conflict.
Mm-hmm.
That's beside the point that you really shouldn't be bad mouthing them just because it's backbiting, even if it's true. But still, that's going to cause a huge conflict in that child's mind. They might not ever realize how terrible their actual biological parent was unless you spell it out for them. Unless you tell them, hey, listen, since the time that you were 7 until you were 27, I paid $5,000 a month for all these things. I, got you braces. I put you through school. I paid your tuition.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, he's walking you down the aisle, or is the guest of honor to graduation. So unless you actually pinpoint how bad he was, no one's really going to know. That child is probably not really going to be able to pick up on that until they themselves are in that situation.
Yep.
Some people are adults at 50 years old and they still don't realize that. So you're probably not going to be able to win the PR game against the occasional, biological father who shows up here and there, throws a few gifts around. While sometimes you got to discipline. You're telling them to go to bed. You're telling them they can't do this. You can't do that. Turn the TV off.
Yep.
So they're getting, some negative from you. A lot of times, children don't realize that discipline that they need. It was good for them until they grow up and move out. So don't badmouth the other parent at all, ever.
Yeah.
Just be neutral. Don't say anything. If you do say something good. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
He bought you a balloon, great, or whatever, and leave it at that.
Yeah. Now, one real quick tidbit on that is that with this whole blended family step parenting stuff, it's really, in my mind, how I sum it up. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Right? You could do everything right, and at the end of the day, be like, wait, I did everything right. Why am I getting treated worse than that stepdad over there who's been doing everything wrong? That's just how it works sometimes.
Sometimes it happens with your own kids. With your own kids, you're doing everything right, and then you somehow become the villain. And then the stepdad comes in, and he's the hero. It's like,
yep, exactly.
So it happens, man. But
yep.
Yeah. So what was?
So I got a question. I know we can't go too deep into it, but I started thinking about this one situation. So what is some advice, guy? Someone comes to you, I'm about to marry this sister, and now we're talking about people like my age in their 40s, 40s, the high 30s, whatever. But he says, I'm about to marry this sister, and she has 2 adult kids. Now, are there any considerations? Because you're talking about stepdaddy, but when we think about stepdaddy, you're usually thinking about little kids that need to be raised, right? Now, are there any considerations you could think of, or anything that you could advise somebody to worry about when they're marrying someone that actually has adult children?
I would say that if a woman has adult children, as in either they are above 18 and they're living on their own, or they already don't live with her, then I say you put that woman back in the category of a single woman with no children, and maybe she's been married before. Because I say that's the best situation to have if you're going to marry a woman with children, that they have moved out or they already, are living with the father or something. Now, sometimes if the children are already living with the mother and with the father or someone else, and she's single, it's because they got taken from her. So you got to worry about that. They got to be careful with that. But for a woman who maybe she's 38, maybe she's 35, and she had children at 15 and 17, and now there are they're 20 and 21 or 22, and they're on their own, and she's 35 or 38 or 40 or whatever it might be, and they don't live with her, but they are her children. I would say, I mean, that's a great situation. I mean, I think that's perfectly fine. I don't see any negatives with that unless they are living with her. Like she's like, my 25-year-old son who
Yes, that's exactly
Yeah,
what I was
that,
thinking of. So it's
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
that's something that comes up where, and it kind of becomes an issue even right before they become adults. Like say you have like, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids that are on that verge of like they think they're adults, right? They may not be adults. And I've seen the situations where if the man had really analyzed the relationship that woman had with her semi-adult or adult kids, he would have recognized a lot of red flags. Like, oh, I shouldn't get in this situation, because you almost have to look at it like they're not kids no more. That's her social circle, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, these are the people that she's getting advice from, that she relies on, and and how are they impacting her life. And sometimes, because single women, they've maybe been, depending on how long they've been single, they form this unhealthy relationship with their children, where they're not their children anymore. Like there's like, it might sound weird, but their husbands actually, or their sons actually become like their husbands to them. And now you're marrying this woman who, everything except for the intimacy part, she's actually been getting from her son. And I've seen situations where there's like this weird dynamic of, dude, that's her son. Why are y'all having these issues? That's not her ex. That's not, like, that's her son. And it gets real weird. Now, I don't want to get into too detail about it, but it got real weird where it's like, okay, lady, you need to cut that little boy off, and he needs to stop acting like you're his second wife. Like, that is weird. You know what I mean? But there's this weird thing that happens with single ladies and their adult children. And like I said, I guess the best way is to look at it like their social circle. And if that's their social circle, that may be a red flag.
Yeah, absolutely. Just be careful. But I will say before we wrap up that,
Mm-hmm.
of course, yes, this is the Man's World podcast, and we address men, but we don't ever leave the ladies out completely. The ladies can benefit from what we're saying. Of course, they can. And camera messing up.
Yeah, it dipped on you.
I think it died. But before I don't want to fall down, so before I do jump out, but this is what I will say. I will say that for the ladies, a lot of this stepdaddy stuff that we're talking about, for a lady who's a co-wife, it applies. For a lady who's a co-wife, a lot of this applies. Where I've heard plenty of stories where women have been involved in raising stepchildren since they were infants. They even breastfed them and all these things. And for the biological mother to literally just have all the rights and take them away or whatever, and it breaks their heart. It breaks their heart and breaks them down. And so you also have to look at that like, yeah, you're putting a lot of energy and sweat and tears into these children and raising your husband's children and loving them just like your own. But it could wind up a situation also where it's a thankless job where you wind up not getting any of the credit or any of the recognition for all the effort, the blood, sweat, and tears that you put in. Where, yeah, mama is going to get the, even though she may have been, in jail for the last 10 years, in and out of rehab, whatever it might have been. But, at graduation or at the wedding or whatever, they're sitting up there beaming, proud of my, my
Yep.
baby who made it to the wedding when she wasn't there.
Yep.
Or she may not have put in all the energy and time and effort that you did. So for the women, those step mothers and those people who are taking care of their husband's children, you have to look at it the same way. This is charity. This is, so that I can get a barakah and a blessing from my creator, from Allah. And if it comes to that point where you don't get the recognition that the biological mother gets, and you don't get that love and shine, after, you've got them to a cruising altitude and they can fly and leave the nest, you have to be able to swallow that and accept, that that's the situation. Because at the end of the day, as Jafar said, they're not your children. They're someone else's.
Yeah. And we had a couple of comments. Muhammad Bell said, not sure if it was covered, but the dynamic of stepchildren along with having children within a relationship is delicate as well. Yes, we touched on it a little bit in the very beginning. You go back and watch it. And he also said unchecked divorce guilt, abandonment guilt creates a very toxic environment. Yeah, we touched on that as well. So, yep. Thank you guys, everybody, for joining us. Tune in next week as well. We'll try to be here again as well if for next Tuesday night. Again, if there's any questions, type them in the comments. Even in the clips that we put out, if you have a question with a specific clip, put it in the comments and we'll try to address it. Email us, email@amansworld@gmail.com. Thank you again for joining us this week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
All right, so the
And
camera needs some.